Be sure to subscribe to GlobeTrotting if you haven't already. Just over 5 years ago, British Airways grounded its fleet of 747s, leading to the permanent retirement of a beloved type. The decision by the flag carrier of the UK was not an easy one, as it was among the largest operators of the 747 passenger jet at the time. So, why were the planes grounded? What happened with the retirement? Was it something we should have expected? And what did the airline do next? Well, when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, British Airways saw travel demand plummet, and as a result was forced into parking a wide range of its aircraft to cope with the demand drop. By April, the airline confirmed 5 more of its beloved 747s were being brought to the Cotswolds and for Kemble Airport for long-term parking. At that stage, the parking was not for a permanent retirement, although you'd probably say the writing felt on the wall. The Cotswolds became a prime storage location for British Airways aircraft as the carrier scrambled to put its planes in storage and limit costs wherever possible to preserve its position as a flag carrier during some of the more challenging periods since its own conception. Initially, when the pandemic hit, the 747s did continue to fly. However, we know the situation evolved more quickly than what would have been expected, and the planned retention of some 747s in service was shortly after scrapped. These planes sent to various parking locations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the British Airways 747 fleet was not entirely safe from retirement talk, driven by previously confirmed retirement plans that even emerged before the start of the decade. As airlines continued their transition towards next-generation jets, and British Airways' fleet of 747s began to show signs of age, they started preparing for the slow phasing out of the Super Jumbo. In 2017, speaking with Flight Global and the IAG chief financial officer at the time, it was reported that British Airways planned to retire its 747s by February 2024. While of course subject to change, it highlighted the intention to axe the type was definitely present. As part of those plans, the retirement was to occur in phases. One of those phases would see half the fleet depart by 2021. This batch would focus on the older units, which were among the first placed into long-term storage, thereby raising the question of whether this batch would ever return to active service under the current circumstances that were present. Along the way, the retirement plans continued to shift, driven by the delayed delivery of aircraft, changes in demand and more. But retirement was always, unfortunately, firmly in the pipeline for the Queen of the Skies. Despite the scheduled retirement meant to be years away, by mid-2020 it was becoming increasingly apparent that harsh government restrictions and the state the world found itself in was not going to improve anytime soon. And as a result, it was going to force airlines to really rethink their fleet makeup and, unfortunately, scrap some of their older aircraft. British Airways naturally looked to one of its oldest but also most beloved wide-bodies in the Queen of the Skies, deciding in mid-July of that same year to permanently retire the type, therefore not bringing it back to service even for, say, a round of farewell flights or a couple of more months of service. The news, devastating for aviation enthusiasts, was one that wasn't taken lightly by British Airways, but rather after internal studies deemed it essential to ensure the survival of the flag carrier, it was something undertaken. British Airways' confirmation also came just a year after they celebrated their centenary, when they painted 2 of their 747s in retro liveries to commemorate their heritage. Always in the plan, British Airways was moving towards more efficient planes. That includes the A350 and the 787 as part of its future, and to find ways to meet commitments to meet zero emissions by 2050. The incoming aircraft are also 25% more efficient than the outgoing 747, while offering a lesser capacity during a period when demand plummeted. It was a natural decision for the airline to conserve its financial position. Forecasting additionally in the mid-2020s, it was expected the demand would struggle to return to pre-COVID levels for at least another 4 years, although we know it returned earlier with hindsight. For specific airlines, this is what they were going off, and at the time of retirement, any return of global demand seemed very far-fetched. The CEO in 2020 said the retirement was not how they planned for it to take place, considering it had been such an iconic staple of the business for so long, but it was necessary as they needed to ensure the fleet became more environmentally friendly, and most of all, from a logical standpoint, keeping the business afloat. Replacing the 747 has been no easy task, especially since the American plane maker has not offered a dedicated replacement. Nevertheless, British Airways, like many other international airlines, has had to find ways to combat this. The company approaching it in a mixed manner, utilising several newer and more efficient wide-body jets. By the time the 2030s arrive, the airline's long-haul fleet will comprise of primarily next-generation types. These aircraft offer British Airways each something just a little bit different, and they'll certainly help elevate the long-haul net worth, with massive cost savings over continuing to operate the 747. While many of these next-generation planes I speak of have been delayed due to substantial supply chain constraints stemming from the pandemic, ironically, on paper they represent upgrades from what the airline once flew. And as the carrier said, at the time of the retirement of the Boeing 747, it'll always hold a very special place in the heart of British Airways and the UK aviation industry. But it was time to move on. The pandemic presenting that perfect opportunity for many global airlines to reassess their fleet requirements, which led to the grounding and then, for a lot, the eventual retirement of your older, less efficient, and unfortunately, I'll say it again for us aviation enthusiasts, your quad-engined wide-body aircraft. Thanks for watching, take care, be safe, and I'll see you in a couple of days for more industry analysis.
And we'll fly.